that if I were black, they'd have killed me a long time ago. And if I were black and saying the things I say, I wouldn't be alive.
I create to connect. I'm Konstantina Mahlia, a lifestyle creator, artist, author, designer, and speaker, for whom it is my honor to introduce you today, Jane Elliott. Jane's lifetime of anti-racism activism began as an elementary school educator who responded to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a call to action. She did this in 1968 by enacting a classroom exercise based upon one created by Adolf Hitler in the Second World War. Jane's adaptation, not adoption, of this horrific genocidal experiment was to expose the nature of arbitrary discrimination and racism. The exercise, titled Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes, exposed the participants' belief that some humans saw their fellow humans as inferior or superior solely based upon the arbitrary color of their eyes. The participants were 8-year-olds. Jane's exercise has since been taught to, replayed, and inspired millions around the world. Now in her late 80s, Jane continues to lead by her indomitable dedication and unquenchable passion for social justice, and her brutal honesty is a high bar that continues to be an unrelenting challenge to us all. We can choose to live a life with leadership, integrity, empathy, and compassion, as she is unequivocally modeled for all members of the human species through her life's work. And may I also say that I, as a writer and linguist, I know a lot of words, and I use a lot of words. My podcast might have you Googling definitions. That would be awesome before we lose all of our language skills due to atrophy, and I think Jane's really going to appreciate that part. So, in the beginning, take a look at the map behind me, because this is a migratory map that proliferated humanity. About 2 million years ago, the world saw a mass migration begin from the tip of continental Africa through land bridges that extended to every landmass on the planet. This mass migration spread the human species across the globe, and a variety of physical characteristics evolved to adapt our species to the differing climatic conditions necessary for our survival. For those that are unaware, racism has been determined to be a denial of science. We are one species and one race with varying amounts of melanin in our skin. We're the humans of a single species, and this conversation is going to begin by establishing that race is a concept and species is a fact. So good day to you, Jane. It's so good to have you here with me. And how are you this afternoon?
Well, I'm fine, and sometimes I'm better lighted than this, but that's fine. I think we need to realize that race is a lie.
Okay.
The idea of race is a lie. It isn't a myth. A myth is something that we will make up to explain something that we don't understand in nature. A lie is something we make up to make our unacceptable behaviors acceptable. And that's what we've been doing with race in this country and in the world ever since the early 1500s. It's time to give it up.
I agree. How would you explain what were the most egregious social catalysts that produced this evolution of racism and sexism and elitism? What do you think that began with in the 15th century?
Religion.
Religion.
This whole thing started with religion when Torquemada, during the Spanish Inquisition, was going to turn everybody Catholic. And he found out finally that he had killed a number of Christians. He didn't mean to kill Christians. He only meant to kill those who weren't Christians yet. He was going to bring the Christians into Catholicism. He found out he killed a bunch of Christians, and then he realized you can't tell what a person's religion is by looking at them. So he had to find a way to decide by looking at people whether they were likely to be or not to be Christians. And so he set upon skin color, and he called light-skinned people white and dark-skinned people black, because white is the color of purity and goodness, and black is the color of savagery and evil. And we are living with that to this day. People do not come in black and white. Cats do, dogs do, horses do, cows do, some birds do, but human beings come in shades of brown, because we all came from the same place, someplace in Africa, and we all have a certain amount of melanin in our skin. It's time to get over the idea of white and black. When you label people in that way, you create a chasm between them that cannot be easily surmounted. It's time for us to stop using those two terms.
How effective do you think it's been in erasing the terminology?
It's not being effective in erasing the terminology because white people hold the idea of the superiority, the supremacy of white people near and dear to their hearts. And they're quite convinced that God is an old white man with a long gray beard that looks like Charlton Heston playing Moses. And people, darker skinned people, have been called black in an insulting way for so long that now they are turning it to their advantage, which is fine, except that it's a misnomer. They aren't black. I can look at most of the black people who call themselves black that I meet, and I can look at them and I can see where their hair stops and where their skin begins. People generally, human beings generally, do not color and come in black and white.
I mean, today we have an erosion of democratic norms. We have an escalating climate emergency. We have onerous racial inequality, as we've just covered. We have rampant sexual injustice. We have a crackdown on our right to vote. We have rampant pay inequality, and we have an America that's in the fight of its life as the leader of the free world. And it seems to be in a free fall, taking everyone down with it. In the face of these intimidating and discouraging current issues, what do you respond? I mean, you have so much more experience to have seen things replay.
I've got a lot of experience. At 88, I've got a lot of experience, but I don't have a tenth, not a 1,000th of the experience that any melanaceous or melanotic woman has. Make no mistake about that. I have not had experience with racism. I've had experience trying to kill it. But one of the statements that you just made, number one, you call people white and black. I resent that horribly. And you call this country America.
I don't believe I used white and black.
Okay, you didn't use white and black. All right. But I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
all right.
so accustomed to people saying those two words.
Right.
You call this country America. America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. This country that we call America is the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and some islands off the southeastern coast of the United States. That's all there is to the United States of America. If we don't stop calling this America and start calling it the United States of America, we're doing ourselves a grave disservice because the most important word in that title is the word united. And for 4 years, we had a so-called president who tried to divide us, and he is still doing that. We've got to start calling this country the United States of America. And if you don't want to use all those syllables, then you can call it the U.S. because the two letters U.S. spell the word us. And that's what this country is. It is us. It is those of us who have been born and bred or who have immigrated to the United States of America, where we intend to stay united.
I agree with your clarification of the terminology. I also liked a metaphor I heard you say, I think even in the Oprah Winfrey interview, where you said that we are a salad bowl, we are not a melting pot.
We aren't a melting pot. You put all these different things in a melting pot, and what you come up with is something that's all the same. You melt them down so that they're all the same. That isn't what the United States ought to be. We're more like a stir fry. You put all the pieces in that stir fry, add some sauce to it, stir them all together, add a little heat, and the pieces maintain their identity. They do not have to give up their identity in order to be a part of the melting pot, of the stir fry. Of the stir fry. I used melting pot until I thought about it a while, and I thought, no, that's not what we want.
Yeah.
We want to be a stir fry.
Yeah, I'm Canadian by birth, and we use mosaic up there a lot.
Yes, and I use mosaic when people say to me, "Well, I'm a child of a mixed race family," and I say, "Well, which of your parents came from outer space?" And they say, "Well, what should I say?" I say, "You should say mosaic. A mosaic is an art form that is new and beautiful and unique and made of many different elements."
Mm-hmm.
So that most of us are mosaic. We need to realize that.
I agree, and it is going to make us a better society. You're so well read, and you've traveled the world with your passion to educate as many people as possible on this issue of racial bias and racial injustice. What's been the most discouraging aspect of your journey?
The election of Donald Trump.
I can believe that.
Yeah, because we were on our way. When we elected Barack Obama, I thought we're on our way. People are understanding that we are brothers and sisters. We're not brothers and sisters. We are all 30th to 50th cousins. People are beginning to understand that. But what I didn't understand and what I didn't realize, what I didn't look for, was the fact that people like Mitch McConnell were going to be determined that they were going to keep Barack Obama from being successful. and people went underground, and they worked desperately hard to see to it that he didn't succeed. They made a big mistake doing that, because that led us to a situation where people who would agree to go back to Christianity and use Christianity, and now it's the evangelical Christians, to elect someone who appeals to their need to live in the 18th century. I don't need to live in the 18th century. I'm happy in this one.
Yeah.
And I think we need to give up the ideas of the 18th century and the 14th and 15th century. If we're going to use white and black, we're going to use the language of the 14th and 15th century, then we should use the means of communication and transportation that they used in those days. And men should come to work in knee breeches and powdered wigs, and women should come to work wearing nothing but something that will keep their waist no larger than 18 inches around. Now, I don't think that most people want to do that, but they do want to use the language of the 14th and 15th century. It's time to give it up.
Agreed. What's been the most inspirational aspect of this journey you've chosen?
When I saw young people, all kinds of young people, marching in the street after the death of Floyd, I can't remember his name, sorry about that. But there were all kinds of people, and unfortunately, the people who were describing it on the news said there are people of all races out there. And I thought, oh, good God, please. No, there aren't people of all races out there. There are people of all colors, all genders, all sexual orientation, all ages, all sizes, all nationalities, but they are all members of the same race. But there they were, young people, huge numbers of young people marching in protest of what the police had done. That tells me that young people are ready to walk away from this idiocy that we have been practicing in this country for 300 years.
And that emotion and that outrage really spread across the globe. I was in Los Angeles at the time, and it was really inspirational. It sounded for days and days as though I was in the middle of the Vietnam War from the helicopters flying overhead, right. But at the same time, such a time of pride to be in the middle of a society fighting to have
right.
justice for the injustice done. Yeah.
But justice for all of us, not for just us.
No.
In this country, it's been just for just us, people who look like me. That's what we have had in this country, and we have absolutely demanded that we keep it that way. And right now, the things that are doing, that Mr. Trump and his cohorts are doing, is an attempt to keep the justice for just us. And if we white people, so-called white people, if we melanemic people, ever get justice from people of color, we're going to be in big trouble.
There's an interesting clip I want to show you. It just showed up this morning on Instagram. That's a movie that's coming out called Armageddon. And it's going to reference exactly when you were beginning to find your voice in this fight. I think you're going to find a great deal of empathy with the set. It's called Armageddon, and we're going to play a clip for it, and then I'd like to discuss it with you after you see it.
Okay, all right.
Ready to go.
Sometimes kids say bad words about the black kids. Who's that? Somebody from my old school. Did they ever come to your house?
What do you do when that happens?
Obviously nothing, of course.
You think that's smart? Next time those schmucks say anything bad about those kids, you're gonna say something. You're gonna be a mensch, okay? Firm handshake. Okay, give me a hug.
What do you think about that, Jane?
I think it's wonderful because just 2 weeks ago, I read the book, Gangsters versus Nazis. Have you read it?
I have not.
You haven't heard of it. Well, it's a book about, and tells the truth, about a group of Jewish gangsters from 1939 until the end of 1945 who were active in keeping the Germans who came to this country to try to do in this country what Hitler did in Germany, and they destroyed them. Whenever they started to have a meeting, the gangsters, the Jewish gangsters, would get together and destroy the people who were trying to have the meeting. And they drove them out of this country. That is what's going to happen with the Proud Boys, with the QAnon, with the KKK, with the Oath Keepers, and with the Three Percenters. The people who care, who want to preserve the United States of America as a United States of America, are going to have to absolutely refuse to tolerate the things that these Proud Boys and the people like them are doing. We're going to have to stand up, just as that man said. We're going to have to stand up and say, not in my town. You're not going to bring that here. We have people of all kinds in this community, and you are not going to come here and bring your hatred to this community, your hatred based on your ignorance about skin color and religion. This we will not tolerate. And it's going to take that, a huge numbers of people who are willing to do that, to put a stop to this. We cannot depend on the people who are writing the legislation, because the people in Congress now, many of them are there who have been put there by the trumpeters. And three members now of our Supreme Court are there because of somebody who believes it's time to divide the United States of America. So we all got, every one of us have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to let this happen here.
So how do you inspire love and compassion over fear and hate?
I don't inspire love. I inspire justice. I don't have to love you to provide justice for you. And I don't have to hate you to say what you're doing is wrong. I know the difference between right and wrong. My dad would say to us on a weekly basis, you know the difference between right and wrong, now do the right thing, goddammit. Now I always thought, Dad, you're swearing, you shouldn't do that. But I didn't correct him because I knew what was going to happen if I did. But he was right. We know the difference between right and wrong. And we need to start talking about the right instead of spending all our time watching television and talking about the wrong. Right now, if you turn on television in the United States of America, you are bombarded with the horrible things that people are saying about the Democrats, and the Democrats are saying equally ugly things about the Republicans, but for different reasons. What's happening in this country today is frightening because we have instant communication. So now whatever somebody says in this country representing the United States of America is spread all over the world instantly.
Yeah, I brought that up in our...
We have to spread something different.
I had sent you in my notes for our interview today that the internet's caused a viral explosion in our ability to communicate and influence social norms across the globe and across political borders. And do you see this as an evolution and an escalation of that's always being the worst of us or the best of us? I mean, what do you see with that ability?
We were warned about this by a man who said, stay away from television, it will wreck your mind. Marshall McLuhan, did you ever hear of him?
I have.
Right, see if you could, Marshall McLuhan said, stay away from television, it will destroy your community. And that's exactly what's happening. We have all kinds of children from the age of 3 to the age of 93 today who are screen addicted. If they didn't see it on their Palm Pilot, or they didn't see it on the television, it isn't real. And what you see in television lasts for 4 minutes at a time, and then you go to a commercial. And then another 3 minutes, and then a commercial. These kids, when they come to school, and I didn't realize what television would do until I was teaching, and the first year I taught, nobody had a television. Then they got television for Christmas that year, and every one of those kids' attention span dropped drastically, because they would listen to me for 3 minutes, and then they'd want to go do something else. It was wild. I hadn't understood what was happening until I read Marshall McLuhan's book, and I don't remember the name of it, but everybody should read what he wrote, because he predicted exactly what we're going through right now.
Well,
we are using the screen to destroy democracy.
Well, we're not just destroying their democracy. We've destroyed the neurological ability of our brains to be directed by our minds. We've actually caused physiological damage to the organ we use to process information.
That's exactly what Marshall McLuhan said would happen. He said, this will destroy your brain. Stay away from television. Well, it's a great way to keep kids busy, but it's a really bad way to educate them.
Yeah, it's a very inadequate babysitter, so be careful.
Absolutely. But that's exactly the way it's used.
Yeah, I know.
The things that you see and the things that kids can see on television are not things that they should be exposed to on a regular basis. And the way their time is divided in 3 minutes now and then 2 minutes of commercial, 3 and 2 is very difficult to teach them when they come into a classroom setting in which they're expected to listen for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. You can't do it.
Yeah, it's really such an injustice to keep growing our families without the ability to take care of them properly. The brain and the mind need so much attention at such a young age to be allowed to develop. And with both parents working, it's very, very challenging to be able to manage that.
That's right. If I were teaching today, I would say to my students, no matter what their age, you are going to have to spend half an hour in sustained silent reading while you're with me. And I would
Exactly.
send notes to home, and I would send notes home to the parents saying, your kid is supposed to spend 20 to 30 minutes to 50 minutes a day with sustained silent reading, a book that makes sense, and you will sign this paper that says, yes, he did that today, and then at the end of the week, they'll get rewarded for having read most of
Right.
20 to 30 to 50 minutes at a time when they weren't required to. We've got to get kids back to reading the printed word. Reading
And
is
I
fundamental
understand
and
that also,
absolutely essential.
I understand that also handwriting, that they're not teaching them handwriting, Lord, and that handwriting, the exercise of handwriting is very important to mental
Yeah,
development.
they aren't teaching cursive writing anymore because that's too difficult.
Yeah.
I remember how difficult it was to learn to make those circles and to learn to make those lines straight up and then straight down. I learned how to do that, and you had to apply yourself to what you were doing. It took concentration. We don't ask kids to concentrate anymore. All they have to do if they want more entertainment is change the channel. Hit the button and change the channel. This is no way to educate children. This is the way to indoctrinate children.
And you've used that word often in your interviews, indoctrination. And indoctrination rather than, and I forget the comparison you made, indoctrination to?
Education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duc dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. That's not what you do with indoctrination. With indoctrination, you teach children how to be good American citizens. And you don't even use the right map when you teach them how to be good American citizens.
I saw that on one of your
Yes,
presentations, yeah.
Right. I am just infuriated that every classroom in every public, private, and parochial school in this country should have a copy of the Peters projection map or should not have the Mercator projection map because it doesn't tell the truth, and kids need to see the truth. You see,
It's also a
I
visual,
believe-
it's a
wait a minute.
visual, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I believe in CRT. For me, CRT means curriculum respecting truth.
That's beautiful, I hadn't heard that.
Respecting truth. Well, that's because I made it up. That's because I refuse to study something that's about critical race theory, because there's only one race. And
Yes.
a theory is just a good idea. But curriculum respecting truth, we know the difference between truth and fiction, and it's time to start telling the truth.
So we've come kind of full circle to where we began, which was how you took the initiative as an educator to be responsible and to have integrity in the way you taught your students, to make them think. One of my friends had a little class she started, a little private exercise. It was, she's a student of philosophy, and the title of the school was Teaching Children How to Think, Not What to Think. And that's pretty much in a nutshell what you're saying. It's teaching critical thinking skills, and it's teaching, it's not teaching, it's a repudiation of indoctrination, and it's saying we are going to foster education, and we're going to ask them, and we're going to show them how they educate themselves too, because you're also teaching the kids to be responsible and curious to learn, right? And
But the first thing in my estimation that you have to teach when you have a bunch of children of any age, from the age of 3 to 95, is to teach the 3 R's, and not the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, because only one of those begins with R. Writing begins with W, and arithmetic begins with A. It's time to stop talking about those 3 R's and teach the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility. You don't have to be able to read to do that. You don't have to be able to do math to do that. But you do have to teach rights, respect, and responsibility, and you will create a class of students, and I've done it, so I know it works, who feel responsible for respecting the rights of every person, not just in the classroom, not just the students and the teachers, but the janitors, the secretaries, the administrators, the other teachers. Everybody in the building has the right to be respected, and you have to be held responsible if you refuse to respect the rights of others. When we start teaching the 3 R's, rights, respect, and responsibility, we will raise some children who are even more excited about taking care of one another than today's children are.
I agree. I think we're almost shifting the responsibility to the child to educate the parents. And I wanted to show you this. I don't know if you'd seen this book. It's called Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. I showed it on my feed on Instagram last night, and I got actually pushback from somebody in Australia saying that
What's the title?
anti-racist baby.
Anti-racist baby. Well, that's good. I'll
Yeah.
take that.
That's what I
That's
thought
good.
you would enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's basically putting the responsibility on the parents to break the mold, right? And
And
start
that's
doing
where it
things
should be,
differently.
because
Yeah.
that's where racism is learned. Racism is learned before pre-birth,
Yeah.
and it continues after death. In this
The-
country, you learn about racism pre-birth. You learn a person, a woman of color who delivers in most hospitals and delivery rooms in the United States today has to worry about whether she and or her child are going to come out of that experience alive.
Well, I think
I
even
didn't have to
somebody,
worry about that.
I believe even Serena Williams, who's the most famous athlete almost on the planet, she was very vocal about how brutal her experience was
Right,
with
right.
all the privilege she had to give birth to her child.
But she had privilege until she was in their possession, and then they could treat her the way they wanted to. And they treated her, I suspect, in ways that they wouldn't dream of treating me.
I asked you a question, I think, too. I was going to ask you a question. How has the community in Iowa that you taught in been changed by you? What do you think?
Well, several years ago, when Barack Obama was running for the presidency, the kids in the preschool voted for him for president. And the woman who was running the preschool called my sister and said, Mary, the strangest thing happened. These kids all voted for Barack Obama. And Mary said, why do you think that is? And she said, because of Mrs. Elliott. She really changed some of the people in this community, Mary. I thought that wasn't a bad thing until somebody from the University of Iowa who asked me to co-author a book with him, to collaborate on a book with him. And I refused because I knew what he was going to write, because he vilifies small towns in Iowa at every opportunity. And so I said, no, I don't want to work with you on a book. So he wrote a book about the exercise, and it is the most damning and most ugly and most dishonest book I've ever read in my life. And today, I listened to him being interviewed by someone about the book and about what it says in it. And he finally said, and I've gotten all this documented in case anybody wants to sue me. And I thought, you better have it documented, because most of what you're saying isn't true. So that's, but he interviewed people in Riceville. He said he interviewed over 200 people there. I doubt that many of the things that he said were really said by people in Riceville. I have never had an unpleasant experience in Riceville after I left there to teach in Osage. To live in Osage and drive back and forth to Riceville. But I had to leave teaching in Riceville because the elementary principal's wife, who taught at the high school level, stopped me one day at a teacher's meeting, before a teacher's meeting, and said, Jane, you've got to get your kids out of this school. I said, why? She said, because these teachers are trying to destroy their children. I'm watching them do it. You've got to get your children out of here. So I got my children out of that school. That was what happened to my students, my children, my 4 offspring, as a result of that blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. Now, I don't think it was because of their hatred of people of color. I think it was because of their envy of the attention that the exercise that one teacher had done was getting. I don't think it was because of their racism. I think it was because of their jealousy. And I think that the ugly statements that I've heard and that I've heard about being written in this book, I haven't read the thing, but the ugly statements that people are quoting out of the book are just obviously not what those people are saying.
I think I heard in also one of your interviews that your children were beat up at school for being your children.
My parents lost their business. No one would eat in the restaurant owned by the people who raised the town's only N-word lover. My kids were beaten regularly, and so we got them out of there so they don't ever have to go through that again. But the rest of those children, those people in Riceville, have to then go through knowing that I will talk about what happened then, and I'm 17 miles away, so I don't have to put up with any of the nonsense, and they have to live with the nonsense. I don't have to.
I've enjoyed this exchange so much. I've seen you in the various, I did my homework, I've seen you in various interviews demonstrate a really forceful, authoritative, and almost militant attitude. in a lot of your interviews, and you're notably called on it when you used the brown eyes, blue eyes exercise on an Oprah Winfrey show in the 1990s. And again, a really strong one was when an outspoken girl challenged you in a televised classroom exercise in the 80s. I know that opposition to your method has been a sore point with many of your critics and recipients. And what way do you think your idiosyncratic style, like you didn't play the feminine, soft-spoken. I've seen even a lot of your interviewers do that, right? You had authority in what your platform was. You had authority in what you saw as right and wrong. And do you think that helped or was detrimental in hindsight, looking back?
People have to take what they want to take, and they'll take what they choose to take. And those who see the way I behave as being authoritative and knowledgeable and just and right will see it that way. Those who see it as being threatening because it challenges their attitudes or their belief system will see it in a negative way. I believe that we must teach children of all ages the truth. And if we have been lying for years, as we have, it's time now for us to fix it. And I am not trying to make white children feel guilty. That's not the point at all. I'm not trying to make melanated parents and melanated children feel guilty about what happened in the past. I'm absolutely determined to make all of us responsible for what happens in the present in order to create a better future. And
That
you can't
seems
do
very
that
evident. That seems really
Well,
obvious to me. So I would
Well,
always, yeah.
that makes good sense to me.
Yeah.
If that doesn't make sense to you, you have my sympathy, but that's all you're going to get.
Right.
Because it's fine to us. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. Now imagine a country in which we do not set people apart on the basis of our ignorance about skin color. Because you see, skin color isn't the problem. Skin color is natural. Ignorance is the problem.
Yes.
And when we teach the truth about skin color, then we won't have to worry about racism. The truth is the answer to the problem is truth. And maybe my truth is different from someone else's. But I am watching people who were put on the Supreme Court during the last 6 years who lied to get on the court because they're good Christians and claim to be good Christians. So evidently they don't believe everything that's in the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
So either stop calling yourself a Christian or start acting like one. And you can't do both. You can't say I'm a Christian and then vote to take away the rights of people who don't look like you. That's not a Christian thing to do.
Yes, but I read
very wrong with your idea of Christianity.
But there was also a news article that I read today about this gentleman who's extremely wealthy, who was very, very involved in the positioning of the Supreme Court with the amount of money he's funneled into politics. And
Right.
it seems to be one of our biggest problems is that our political system is bought.
It is bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And it's time for those of us who don't have the money to say we don't have the money, but we have the numbers. There are more people who are not wealthy in this country than there are wealthy people. There
That's
are more
right.
people who do not belong to the Business Roundtable. And if you want to read what's going on, get the book The System by Robert Reich and read it. It will blow you away. And then you will realize exactly who has set this thing up and who is going to perpetuate it unless the rest of us, the little people, say no more. If you are going to be Amazon and you're going to control all the communication in this country, then I'll find another way to communicate. If you're going to be a huge conglomerate that is going to control all the food that's sold in this country, I'll find somebody who'll produce food and won't sell it through you. It's time for us to stop doing business with those who are trying to make business the only thing that's important in this country. And their business is making money for them, not making life comfortable for the rest of us, but making money for them. If you haven't read the book Rich Thanks to Racism, you better get it and read it. Everybody had better read that book so that they'll realize how they're being used.
I am adding your reading list to the end of the podcast show notes, so people will have their work cut out for them. And I love
Here's
that you're
something
so.
else
Yeah.
Wait, here's something else you should add. You should add the 3 pages go to my website, jane@janeelliott.com, download the printed learning materials. The first one is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. The second is the clarifications of those statements. First, you make this statement, then you read the clarification, and it tells you why you shouldn't have said that. Then the third page is a set of commitments to combat racism.
Yes.
I think there are 18 or 20 things that you can do in your own environment to deal with your own racism. And
Actually,
people
I'm
say to
ahead
me,
of you.
But I'm not a racist. And I say, wait a minute.
I'm
Yeah,
ahead of you. I
okay,
sent
right.
that out in an
So-
email blast to my email listener, my email list today. So that was even before you and I
Good.
spoke. Yeah.
Okay, and
yeah.
read every book on the bibliography under racism.
I will try my best. I have I read, luckily I'm an English major, so I read quite fast. I'm going to have a last question for you. So Boldly Femme is asking
Okay.
you, how much did your gender affect your battles and wars? Did
My
you lose
gender
me?
is everything.
You want me to, pardon me? Everything?
My gender.
Yeah.
My gender has allowed me to do what I do. Because people will listen to me because I'm female, so I don't have any power. So I have the right to stand up and say things that no male would dare say. They'll listen to me now because I'm old. I'm old. I am old. I'm over 88 years old. That means I'm old. And old is an acronym for octogenarian, living dangerously. And that's exactly what I'm doing. People listening to me because I'm an old white female. White people know more, and females have had so much more experience. This is no reason for listening to me. The reason they listen to me now is if they hire me to work, they are stuck with it because I will say exactly what I think needs to be said. And what I think needs to be said is three things. Number one, without blacks, there would be no whites. Blacks were the ones who moved from Africa and moved farther and farther away from the equator, and so their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. And so those who moved into the northernmost climes were the lightest skin. There'd be no whites without blacks. There'd be no Christians or Muslims without the Jewish faith. The first five chapters of the Old Testament came out of the Torah, which is the Jewish book of faith. And there would be no men without women. Now, if we could just get rid of racism by admitting that there would be no whites without blacks, anti-Semitism by admitting that there'd be no Christians without Jews, and sexism because there'd be no men without women, then we would have time for ageism and ethnocentrism. But until we get rid of those first three, we aren't going to have time to really put all our energy into nationalism.
Well, I can't say how grateful I am for your tenacity, your integrity, I see it as a love for humanity. I'm grateful for the givers that come into my life, and I'm grateful that there are givers as generous of you to give for decades, unrelentingly, to help people live in a better world.
Wait a minute. Have you read the book, The Giver?
I don't think I have read that. But Harrison here is nodding.
It's an adolescent novel. It won't take you a half an hour, and it is one of the most enlightening books I've ever read.
Okay.
The Giver by.
I'm going to Barnes and Noble after I get off of here.
Good idea, but get The Giver first. It is priceless.
Okay.
And what it tells you, it's just remarkable.
That's going to be my Christmas list then for my friends too, friends and family.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I hope you have the right kind of friends, because if you don't, you'll lose them after you give them those books to read. And there's another one out there, The Deconstructist, the Deconstructionist.
Yes, you told me that this morning.
Yeah, I think it's Destructionist.
Mm-hmm.
Get it? It is fantastic. It's just wonderful. And it makes you curious.
Much.
You can't read at a long time because your blood starts to boil and your everything gets angry. So don't spend a lot of time on it. A little bit at a time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope we can repeat this on a feministic theme. And I look forward to reconnecting and staying in touch. It's been a pleasure.
Wait a minute. One more thing. You'd have to realize that in order to get the word for a woman, they added the chemical symbol for iron, Fe, to the word for a man. Word female means add iron to the word for a man, and then you've got the word for a woman. Nobody stops to think about that until you realize that we outlive men.
Yes.
Most of us will live 10 to 20 years longer than the men we live with will.
Yes, my great aunt in Florida told me to marry young.
Marry young. But women are the stronger sex. We need to realize that, and we need to start acting like we are, instead of saying, yes, boss, to some male. We know more than most males do, because we have to if we're going to survive. And black women, melanaceous and melanotic women, know more than we white women will ever learn.
Yes, they're great friends of mine. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're most
We'll do
welcome.
this again.
Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, a pleasure.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.